You can throw glitter onto poop, but it's still poop at the end of the day.
You can't paint a beautiful picture if you don't pick up the brush and the paints.
Keep the human part yours and get the AI to do the boring stuff.
How do we know what good art actually is? And with that, I would just say, take the word art and replace it with the word AI.
What kind of human do you want to be that is going to get amplified?
Hey everyone, welcome to our Friday video where we talk about what we learned with AI this week and how it helped us learn. I'm here with Kosta and Justin. I'm, of course, Tim, and let's get into it.
Not sure if you guys have anything in particular to talk about, but I do see a theme emerging from our constant poster discussions on how we're using AI to learn. And it seems like the theme for me is it really matters when you're using AI, when you're giving AI stuff to do, what you keep for yourself and what you give it. And that line is not necessarily clear. We keep crossing it in ways where we're giving a little bit too much to AI and we come out not understanding stuff, or slop is generated. Or on the other side of the line, we don't give it enough and we're not going as fast as we could be or amplifying ourselves as much as we could. What are you guys' thoughts?
I think that is correct. A spectrum where you can get mixed results, right? I don't think it's necessarily like you cross the line and you're just way more efficient than you were. I think there's levels to it and there's gray areas and there are things that you could get AI to do that's faster, but you might be able to do them better, and vice versa. There might be things that you're spending time doing that AI can do faster, but I don't think it's like one line and we just don't know where it is. I think it's like a spectrum, and I think what's confusing for a lot of people is they have no idea where it even starts or ends, they just don't know what the capabilities of it is, and they can't fathom asking the questions to see those, like where it begins and where it ends. And I think that goes back to people have a hard time getting started with it. They don't know where those lines are, right? They either just make the snap decision very early that I am faster than this, it's giving me garbage, and I can make better content faster. I'm going to spend more time prompting than I am actually just working if I do this. And I've heard that 1,000 times from somebody. And, my response to that is always take this huge Excel and make like a 20-page PDF. There is no possible way a human could do that faster an AI model, but it's the quality. Can you get to the same quality or at least a similar quality? And you definitely can. And people have proven that with the quality of some things that people have gotten produced by AI. But you don't get that in the first prompt. You don't get that in the first 10 minutes or even sometimes the first couple of weeks of using AI. You have to know what you're asking it to do, how to ask it to do that. You have to give it enough context, either through your context model or through the prompt itself. And all of that takes a lot of time, knowledge, and skill.
I think we've said this a lot of times and we keep hearing it. AI multiplies, but it doesn't replace. I think that's not true in the principle that people actually do use it to replace themselves. It certainly has the ability to multiply. Smart, intelligent, intuitive users definitely use it that way. But I think a lot of people actually do just replace their thinking. We've said it before. They check their brains at the door. I think one of the most deceptive things about AI is really the output that it gives from a text base can sound and feel very sharp, but that's just phrasing. It's not actual quality. And my example would be my brain, how it works is very jumbled up. Communication is a really developed skill. I don't think it necessarily comes naturally. It's a developed skill. And I think we can all agree that sometimes we have sharp ideas, but conveying those across properly doesn't always transition the way that we wanted it to. I've certainly had things lost in translation. And then you hear, when you get people to kind of spit it back to you, what was I trying to convey there? their interpretation of your message is vastly different from how you were trying to get the message across, right? Clarifying questions are always really important for me in personal conversations for that exact reason. We sometimes interpret a comment, a conversation a certain way, but it wasn't intended that way. It's part of the human experience that we can sometimes misinterpret. It'd be far more convenient maybe sometimes just to be able to plug into someone's brain, but that's not the human existence. That's not our experience. Our experience is about communicating. So when something comes across sounding really well phrased, which AI output does, a lot of people can take that as this is a more intelligent quality output. But when you actually dive in, you realize this is not my actual intent. This is not what I wanted. It just looks pretty. It's packaged up. What's the whole saying? You can throw glitter onto poop, but it's still poop at the end of the day.
Is that a saying?
It is now.
Yeah, amazing. I can't help but think, while you're talking about communication there and what Tim said, that anyone in a leadership position is really poised to use AI more effectively than other people, because it's almost like having an employer, multiple employees, and communication becomes important. Delegation, which we all know is kind of like also an emotional intelligence skill. Training. There's a lot involved that leaders naturally do. And with Tim, when you were talking, it was fascinating to me that we've had this discussion about leaders that can't make the jump to like delegating or getting the most out of their team. And what you were saying about getting the most out of AI, or people just giving up and saying, I could just do this better, is the same exact conversation that we've had. Then you layer on communication, and I'm like, oh man, these are all things that we've discussed for years in a leadership position. It's just that AI might not necessarily be human, but what we know from that is that it's both an art form and a science, right? That emotional intelligence quality, that line or spectrum that Tim was talking about, all of the communication aspects that you were balancing, Justin, they're all kind of an art form and a science, and people just want the steps. People want the facts. Like, what steps do I take? What's the science behind getting the most out of AI? And really the huge part that they're missing is the art form. And you have to do art to kind of get better at art and get more creative. And Justin, you mentioned, it's giving you this stuff that's not really the human experience. And that's the whole artistry of it. That's the art part that's missing versus the science of it. And that line or that spectrum is very gray, and it's very different and unique based on the human individual, just like art.
So how do you get around it while using AI? How do you allow AI to amplify you, but still not fall into that trap?
The first step, and we talk about this all the time, is doing being an artist is not something you have to get around. It's a huge part of the human experience. It's maybe not avoiding it and doing it. That's the actual answer, because we kind of dance around this or pussyfoot around this a lot. And we always come down to one thing is, you can't paint a beautiful picture if you don't pick up the brush and the paints. And so the very first step is doing it. Now you can find your Bob Ross, to teach you where to put trees and how to use the fan brush and but unless you pick up the brushes and actually do it, you're going to kind of find your way. So you can find your mentors. You can figure out what you want to uniquely build, but you really want the brushstrokes to be yours. So there's no replacing painting the picture. And it takes a lot of pictures to paint before you get your masterpiece. It does not happen overnight. So I'd say patience is up there as well.
I would also say leaning into the human part of the experience, like people who get ChatGPT to write an essay on like an ethical quandary or something like that, they're like totally missing the point, right? Like it's they're not like getting you to write the essay because they want to make sure that your words, like you can put your words together. That's part of it. It's like 20% or 30%. But most of it is like, do you understand this problem enough to talk about it? Or do you understand this situation or this idea enough that you can convince me that you have thought around it and you have kind of committed it to your internal monologue? And so it's like, if you really hate writing essays and you have to write 1,000 essays or whatever, right? You can get AI models to help you write those essays while still keeping the core content yours. It can still be yours, your choice of words, your choice of ideas, and all of that. I think one of the things that sets human writing and AI writing apart is we have all learned, we are all a collection of all of our experiences when it comes to reading and writing and things that we've made or things that we've experienced. We are just huge piles of memories and experiences, and AI is an amalgamation of all of the content on the internet. So there's no like uniqueness to it. It's just average right across the board. You can infuse your experiences into your use of AI. You can get it to use certain words, you can get it to not use certain phrases. The very classic it's not X, it's Y. That's like every single AI is going to do that because that's like it's clickbait. So it's like if you're scouring the internet, it's going to pick up these clickbaity type things because that's the data it's being trained on. So you can adjust it and keep the core content yours by making sure your prompt is not write me an essay. It's walk me through this content so I can tell you what I think about it, or something along those lines. And then when you fully flesh out all of your ideas, then you can either write the essay yourself because you know it so well, or get it to generate something for you. But that's kind of my, like, keep the human part yours and get the AI to do the boring stuff.
Hey, here's a question. I want to piggyback on what you had just stated there earlier, Costa, because you were talking about art. And here's the challenge with that analogy. Art, whether it be dance, singing, or, anything within the realm, it's abstract and it can be subjective to the viewer. How do we know what good art actually is? And with that, I would just say, take the word art and replace it with the word AI.
Yeah, that is a thought-provoking question that I'd probably have to sit on for a really long time and kind of evolve over years. There is the science part to it, and that is the tool part, right? And it's not the part that you're necessarily talking about, but it is part of me wrapping my head around the question, which is like how it amplifies a human, and that's the art part. And for example, you could have binoculars as a tool. Our eyes can't see that far as a human, but that tool amplifies our eyes, and now we can see farther and we can make better decisions based on what we can see in the distance. That's the tool aspect of it. The art is what is amplified in the human being. And to be totally truthful, we don't know what good AI looks like. We don't know what that good art looks like. And the one thing that I think unequivocally is we aren't prepared for it at the current level of human consciousness. We're going to have to grow as humans. And that happens one human being at a time. So if there was one piece of advice that I would give people in search of the answer to that question, it's really work on yourself, because you're going to get amplified. And what kind of human being do you want to be? What kind of human do you want to be that is going to get amplified? And it's a deep, like, spiritual, very introspective question, and it's up to the individual.
I'd like to layer on that too, and say art is subjective. Anyone can view it and have an opinion on it, and that's kind of how it has evolved. But there is a internal aspect to, right? There's this idea of like, are you making art for other people or are you making art for yourself? And if you're making art for other people, you have this constant external pressure and force applied to your decisions and what you spend your time doing and all that. And if you are making art for yourself, you have internal, right? You don't let other people's opinions of your art tell you how you want to phrase things. And then that's just kind of like a thing that was going through my head, that it is subjective, But the internal part, I think, is where art comes from, and that's subjective to you. And that's important because it's being subjective is tough when you put 20 people in a room and ask them, is this good? But being subjective is very important when it's just you're talking about, because you're subjective about so many things about your life, right? Like there are decisions that you make that, you can only make. And just the other part too is that the art itself is subjective, but there are techniques and there are processes and there are parts of it that are objective, right? A musician is a great example of this. You can take 10 professional musicians all playing the same piece and have a whole bunch of things to say about the little choices they made to make it different. And you could have subjective opinions on who's the best and all that stuff. There's a bare minimum that they have to get to before they can do that, right? No one would say like a professional cellist playing a really fancy piece is not as good as like some guy who picked up the cello for the first time and just said, oh, I'm creating art, and he's just making random noises on it, right? So there's this kind of like, I think there's subjectiveness to it, but it's not 100% subjective.
I mean, one person's good is definitely another person's trash. I think that kind of sums up subjective in its nature. And I think expression of our art is an expression of the creator. Maybe a question that we don't ask ourselves enough about right now, because we're not viewing it this way, is how does AI represent me? Or how does my personal AI represent me and what I strive to put out to the world? Right? The same way like an artist would use a brush of a stroke on a canvas to show an expression of themselves, the tool in that being the brush, the paint, the canvas. The tool in this analogy is AI, but I am still the one that dictates where the brush goes, how it lands on that canvas, what the final output looks. And would you agree? Maybe people aren't asking themselves that question enough. They're viewing it almost as a replacement, not an enhancement of themselves.
I don't think people are asking that at all, %. And I think it's similar to if you take somebody who has never painted in their life, give them a paintbrush and ask them what that paintbrush means to them and what it's capable of, they wouldn't even they'd be like, it's a stick with Brussels on the end of it and you can take paint from a jar to a thing. But if you take someone who's been painting their entire life and asks, what does this paintbrush mean? What can this do? Right? Their answer is going to be like, it can create worlds. It can create emotions. It can change people's minds. It can adjust the day of someone, either good or bad. It has so much power. You could say the same thing for writing, like the pen. What is the power of the pen to someone who can't write? It's meaningless. It doesn't matter. But to someone who can write something that changes somebody's mind, like that means the world. So I don't even know if it's like people are not asking that question, but I don't think they're capable of asking that question because they don't know what it is capable of. They're holding a tool that they cannot fathom and can't understand. And the only way to truly appreciate that tool and to be a master of that tool is to understand that and, grow your own skill and art and understanding of what that's capable of.
If everybody can ask that question or has the ability to ask that question, you're absolutely right. They're not. And it's a sign of the times, that we're straying away from, because it's a personal question that you ask, where AI companies, these large AI companies are thinking about how to prevent terrible people from, like, let's say, making a biological weapon. That's an amplification of a terrible individual. And to ask that question is to be in search something that we've been chasing our entire lives. And it's interesting. It's necessary to ask that question in the AI age, because I think we do have to elevate as humans. Will we ever get the answer? No. Are we always in search of it? Yes. And I think you even see that emerging in our Everwise philosophy, right? Like, what is a good way to use AI? Always seems to be a more loaded question than we think. And we just keep peeling these layers of the onion back. But it comes down to, when we're sparring back and forth with our ideas or in the Everwise community, that some tactical things emerge. Number one is to spiritually work on yourself. Number two, don't let AI pick your next move. That should be based on what you know, so that you can walk away a better individual. Like, take the information that you know and put it out into the world. And that's a way to amplify yourself, and then see how the world reacts and analyze it. So we're kind of figuring it out. And I don't think we will ever figure it out. It's an age-old human question. I think that it's necessary in the AI age. And I think that it's a real definition for the quest that Everwise is on, is let's keep digging into that question and see what we can come up with.
I actually do have some stuff that I did this week. So I have access to Copilot through my work, and it is very limited and very. It doesn't allow you to adjust it or change it very much. It's very kind of like stock, and but it gives you a lot of connections, and it gives you a lot of these things you can do with it, and it does have a lot of power. It just is really dumb and doesn't let you customize it very much. But I had this idea from Kosta's context, system, and I really want to try figure out a way to save time providing context, because that's pretty much what, like, I spend 95% of my time trying to tell it I am not the person in the planning department, or I'm not person in marketing, or like, it's like a total amalgamation of everything everyone's doing. And it's pulling up random things and giving it context where it doesn't need it and all that stuff. So I was like, I really want it to be my context. And then, because, like, if I can get that, I can adjust the context until I, get the output I want on the first try instead of the 75th try. So I kind of brainstormed a little bit, and with Copilot, and landed on a SharePoint decision matrix kind of context framing, where I have an agent that's specifically built with these context instructions, and its instructions has all the basic instructions, but all the modifiers to those instructions are in the context, and it gives you the path that it took to get to where it goes. It really doesn't work multiple layers. Like, as soon as you get a set of instructions to tell you to go to a different set of instructions, it starts breaking down and it starts forgetting things and does that. But as long as you have one step, and you can attach like 25, 30 files to the thing, so it's, you can have that many options or whatever. But it's worked very well so far, in terms of, I'm like collecting all of the kind of, and anytime I've had to have more than like 10 or 11 messages getting to a point that I can then polish it, I've gotten all of that information and put it into these context files. And the initial results are pretty incredible. For it tells me the context it's chosen, and then it gives me kind of what I'm asking for, and it's hitting these markers. And I designed these tests to see if it would do what regular Copilot does, and then I'm running it like side by side, the same prompts on just like a brand new page kind of thing, just to see if it's better. And the results are incredible. Like, it's way and above better. And something like this is it's just been so powerful, and I've only been using it for like 2 days. I set it up 2 days ago, and I've already adjusted it a bunch, and I'm sure I'm going to adjust it a bunch over the next month too. But something like that is just like spending less time providing context by already providing the context, especially the context that's not going to change. Like, my role is not going to change until it changes. My audience is not going to change. My expectations of the output is not going to change within a project and all that. And I have no clue how to set that up, and it helps me do it. I just talked to it like a human and got everything kind of squared away. And when it started making bad decisions, I kind of jumped in and made sure I was a part of all of the decisions, and made sure that every step I confirmed that this is what I want it to do, and then was a part of testing it and everything.
I like it, especially Tim, since you might not have access to the best tools, and you're not using that as an excuse as well. I really like that part. And I created a brain dump pile. Justin, you've talked about this a bunch. We have a similar way that our brain works, in kind of like an ADD, shiny object. Ideas keep popping in. kind of disappear into the ether kind of quality. And so I did create a brain dump list. It's great. So before it disappears from my mind, I just capture it by voice and I create this list. And the main objective when I started was to kind of relieve worry. So I had this like stress or worry that these great ideas were going to disappear into the ether and I wouldn't get to do them and my life wouldn't turn out great. And that's not what actually happened. You know, it's funny that I didn't even know that I was doing that, first of all. But it turns out that it was way less of a to-do list and more of a mirror. You know, it was showing me patterns that I was exhibiting that I didn't know. It showed me in what I was trying to capture what the priorities are in my life. And it was very reflective instead of kind of relieving that worry. Now, it did relieve that worry, but it was very easy for me to take that next step in personal growth and work on myself because it was a mirror. And I did find as well that so I went 2 weeks without triaging my brain dump list. And after 2 weeks, I looked at it and I had gone ahead without even looking at the brain dump list and done every important thing. So I realized too, the important things, they'll just get done. They keep popping into my head. I'll keep like maybe worrying about them or stressing out about them till they're done. And it didn't have its intended effect, but it is having a cool personal growth effect on me where I'm re-looking at what my priorities are, what I want in life, and I want to map the actions that I take on a daily basis to make sure that I get those things in my life.
I think this conversation went in places that were very philosophical before we even talked about what we've been using AI for. I thought it was still a very rich conversation, gentlemen. I appreciate for it. Hey, if this is your first time here, we want to thank you for getting this far through the video. We'd love for you to like, comment specifically on this because it helps us better understand our audience and how we can help you guys and what we can talk about. If these are the kind of conversations that you love, we invite you to come back. We invite you to join our school community. That's what Everwise is all about. It's about building that community where we can share likes, where we can share with each other on how we are building, how we're using AI to amplify us, and maybe even getting into those bigger questions of how does AI represent me and what I strive to put out into this world. That's a question that I think all of us gentlemen are probably going to sit on today and put some thought into. How do we use it as our brush to create our masterpiece?